My guest is Ryan Leaf. He was the number 2 pick in the 1998 NFL draft. He was selected by the San Diego Chargers after starring at quarterback at Washington State. He's now a dad, a keynote speaker. He's the host of a new sports talk show with PointsBet USA and NBC Sports. It's called The Straight Line with Ryan Leaf. He's an analyst for ESPN College Football, and he really shares his poignant story via the 10-episode podcast called Bust. We'll talk about that. You can follow him on social media at Ryan D. Leaf. Ryan, thanks for joining me on Sports Business Radio. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I followed your story for a long time. I think we're kind of close to the same age, and I'm so impressed with your comeback. I think it's one of the great stories in the last 20 years. For people who may not have followed your story super closely, you were drafted, like I said, by the San Diego Chargers. It was really between you and Peyton Manning for the number 1 pick. You grew up, you weren't a partier. You weren't using drugs. You had good parents. When did things start to kind of turn into an adverse situation for you?
Probably, after a couple of those losses in San Diego, I'd never really failed before, or at least I thought I hadn't failed before. I had failed, multiple times in my life. Don't get me wrong. I just I didn't see it as that, and now I was failing at the highest level in front of the entire world, and I was not equipped to deal with that in a healthy way, and so I behaved and reacted the only way I knew how to, and that was to be defensive, fight back, dig in, be the big, strong athlete like I'd always been, because I was always able to self-correct by performing well. But when you're at the highest level of your occupation, where there's the best of the best, you can't do that with your central nervous system on tilt all the time. And so I crashed and burned really publicly, and then I compounded that by not seeking any sort of help with my mental health distress, and chose to self-medicate in the only way I know how to.
I have a lot of athletes on this show, some current, some former. It seems like now there are better resources when it comes to mental health for athletes. Athletes aren't as afraid to talk about mental health issues. Do you think if there had been some of those resources back when you played, that things might have been different?
Well, I think there was always resources. There's always been those resources. I think the stigma that surrounded mental illness was so pronounced. I had never seen another male peer of mine say, I need help. Can somebody help me? I'd never seen it in real life. I'd never seen it in TV or movies or anything like that. There was a toxic masculinity to the sport I played in, and the culture I grew up in Montana, where it was a cowboy culture. And so if you'd never seen it, how would you know how to do that? How would I have known to say, hey, I need help here. Can somebody help me? And so therefore, even though there was resources available, I didn't view them as positive. I viewed them as shameful. It was a shaming way. If you went to a therapist, that means there was something wrong with you. And that's what the stigma does. And the stigma still exists. It still holds people down all the time. People really admire a lot of people speaking up and how a spotlight's being shined on it. But that stigma is still incredibly influential. It stops people from asking for help still. They may look at my story or hear me speak and go, that's amazing. That's what an amazing story and everything like that. But people still don't act because of the stigma that still exists. And so it's important that we continue to tell our story and shine a light on it. So, 10 years from now, the stigma doesn't exist at all. So when somebody is going through something similar that I was, it's not even a second thought to be like, boom, I need some time for me. And I think we saw that with Calvin Ridley a year ago. We're seeing it from some other individuals who are at least on the athlete side of things, which I think is a good sign.
Yeah, I mean, I look at Kevin Love, DeMar DeRozan, you mentioned Calvin Ridley, and yourself as people who are helping to change that stigma. This is not a weakness. This is something a lot of us battle.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's more apt for people to deal with this type of illness than anything else, right? I mean, it's just uh, with social media, with the pandemic and the isolation, the anxiety and social distress and things like of that nature. I think it's important that you have an outlet, that you have an ability to express those feelings in a safe environment where you can be, diagnosed. I think that's the biggest thing for a lot of us. We want to know why. And when you have a mental health disorder, it's invisible. So unless you have somebody really able to diagnose that and show you like, this is what this is, you don't necessarily know if you can confront it or combat it. And so that's why that was huge for me when I went into treatment, to finally get a dual diagnosis and understand, what it was, and not just me being lazy or or just a junkie, things like that. It's important to know why. As a human being, we're invested in why something's happening and how we can maybe solve that or try to.
The other thing that is both a blessing and a curse for a lot of young pro athletes, the money. You come into lots of money, and there are many pro athletes, it's well documented, that they don't know how to handle that newfound fortune. What was that like for you? Do you think you were well equipped to handle that money, or do you look back and go, ooh, I could have known a lot more about how to handle that money?
Yeah, I didn't, my parents were amazing. My dad, built his business up and, did it with character and integrity. And we didn't necessarily want for anything growing up, but I also knew I also didn't know the exact details of what my parents were going through, and living paycheck to paycheck and things like that. They just always took care of us boys. So I never thought money would change me. And I honestly can tell you that money changed me. Like, money gave me the idea that I was more important than anybody else. It was the money, power, and prestige aspect of what made you a success. And now I had all of it. And you weren't going to tell me anything. I pushed away the people that tried to hold the mirror up to me and show me my behavior. I had all the answers now because I had all the money, the power that came with that. And so, yeah, it changed me. I just, if there was an inkling of superficial mindset because I was a great football player, that was exacerbated, tenfold when you added the money to the equation.
I've listened to your 10 episode podcast, Bust. I think it's phenomenal. I can't remember too many athletes being as forthcoming and reflective as you are in that podcast series. When did things hit rock bottom for you? When did things turn around? I mean, I've had Michael Vick on this show, and I asked him to explain to our audience, when you were lying in the prison cell night one and you had lost your freedom, you were the highest paid player in the NFL, like, take me into that cell and the mindset. When did you hit rock bottom and go, oh my gosh, I got to turn this around?
I don't think I ever did. I don't think I ever did. I think rock bottom ultimately is when you just don't get back up. So it just, it took time. Even when I started to change and do things differently while I was in prison, I still didn't know what was happening then, right? It's like you can't see the forest, through the trees mentality. It ultimately was starting to be of service to other people. That's what changed it for me, but I didn't know what was happening then. So I don't believe I've hit rock bottom. Prison was not a deterrent. I could go stand on my head in prison for the next 20 years and be fine. It's a choice on whether I want to be there or not. And I'm choosing at the time right now not to be in there anymore, because I can quickly remedy that by, going back to my old life tomorrow. I'll be right back in prison or dead in a gutter somewhere. So I don't think there was ever a rock bottom. You'd think it would be, going to prison, or you would think it would be, attempting suicide, but No, that's not it. The rock bottom would ultimately be where you don't get back up.
You talk about service to others. One of the things you've mentioned is one of your prison mates kind of dragged you into helping some of the other prisoners learn to read. And that was a service to others. Did that kind of change the mindset a little bit?
Yeah, that was the moment. I mean, but I didn't know it then. It was just something that I did. I can't tell you why I did it either. I've had many of those kind of come to Jesus moments in my life, from family, from mentors, from coaches. So I can't tell you why I went. He suggested we go down and help prisoners who didn't know how to read, learn how to read. And I went. I mean, I still did it begrudgingly. I thought he was stupid, thought it wasn't going to help me. And I just looked at him like, doesn't he know how important I am? And the irony of that is the guy in a red jumpsuit, in a prison, thinks he's still important. That's the sickness of my narcissism there. So I started doing that. And this is where I found out, and this is where the first time I ever saw another man in a place where you're supposed to show no vulnerability go, hey, I don't know how to read, Ryan. Can you help me? And I looked around like, what's wrong with this dude? And so it was just two men in real adverse conditions, really helping each other out. And so I kind of knew that was going to have to be the foundation for when I got out. So when I got out, I tried to use that as a guiding path to like, okay, this never can be about you again. This has to be about someone else. And that's important. And so that's where I started making it that. I didn't, like I said, I didn't know when it was happening. I just started to realize I was, sleeping better. I was more personable. I was speaking to family, things like that, little shifts in personality and behavior and emotional acuity and things like that. But, I never fully understood it when it was happening. I can't go like, I can look back now and point to that, but not at the time it was happening.
How does one shed narcissism and ego?
Service. I mean, you make it about other people. I mean, narcissism is all about you. It's all about you. Everything that you do or say or think, it has to do with you. So if you make it about somebody else, that will subside a little bit. I mean, I think if you have narcissistic personality disorder, which I do, that's never going to go away. You just have to curb it, and you have to be aware of it and understand it, because it's just, I think it was a driving factor in my success too, right? Because of how I worked and how I went about my business. It's a tricky slippery slope there when you're talking about it. It can take you in a really bad direction. It can take you to real success too. I think some of the greatest athletes of all time who have been champions and stuff are incredible narcissists, and so it's a matter of being aware of it, understanding it, and not feeding it. And so that's kind of what I figured out. If you made it about somebody else, like, your life got better. That's ironic to me. I thought it had to be all about me for my life to get better, but when you make it about somebody else, your life gets better. And that flew in the face of everything I thought was right, or how to go about things.
You are a 7-time felon. You are a recovering addict.
There isn't more than that. I feel like I'm a double-digit guy. Maybe, I don't know.
No, I think it's just 7.
Oh, I think there's probably more.
Okay. How do you earn trust? Because you're working with PointsBet USA. You've worked with ESPN. You've worked with Kevin Conley of Entourage fame on the Bust podcast. You've obviously earned trust of these companies and people that you're working with. And, you've got a rocky past, as we've discussed, and it's well documented. How have you re-earned that trust?
Action. I'm a good storyteller. I can tell you what you want to hear, but bottom line is it's about action. And I received an award on Friday night for my work in the recovery community in Los Angeles. And 2 people came up to me during the event, and one said that I had gone to her school when it was first starting out, a recovery school, to speak, for nothing, just when no one else would give her them the time of day. I came and spoke. I didn't even remember doing that, to be honest. It was 6 years ago. But I did it. And then there was another gentleman that walked up, and he just started a treatment facility, and he passed me 4 years ago or something on the golf course, him and his buddies. And I was ahead of them. And at a tee box one time, they came up and introduced themselves, and he said I was so kind and nice. And that wasn't me my whole life. When people talked about meeting me or interacting with me, it was like, I met that Ryan Leaf. What an asshole, That's how I was used to hearing. And so what happens is you become your own referral. Both those individuals had communication with the event planner in this, and they were doing trying to decide who was the most impactful people in the recovery world in Los Angeles this last year. And, they became referrals of mine that I didn't even know I had, because of how I treated someone else in the moment, when it wasn't about me. I made it about them. And that's what builds trust. And it takes time. And there are going to be people who don't trust me ever again, and rightfully so. And I have to understand that. So I just, I don't buy into what other people think of me, is any bit of my business. If they choose not to want me to be part of something that they're doing, that's their prerogative, and I understand it. But those that do give me a chance, that do lift me up and support me, I absolutely work my tail off for them, and will do so, because I have perspective and gratitude that I think a lot of other people don't, when given second opportunities like I have, second, third, fourth opportunities like I've got.
One of the things that I think is really difficult about being a celebrity or a pro athlete is every interaction you have with someone, that's probably their only interaction with you ever. And, some people are going to go, hey, that guy's an a-hole. And other people are going to go, that guy changed my life with what he said and helped my personal recovery. How is that, always having to be on or judged when you're interacting with anyone? And like I said, that may be their only interaction with you.
Well, if it's false, then you have to be on. But if you change, and that's the person you become, then you never have to be on. I mean, everybody has a bad day. Don't get me wrong. Like, life is still life. Life isn't fair. It's about how you deal with it that matters. So I've found over the last 7 years since I've been out of prison that I've attempted to be that version of myself, because I know what it feels like to be treated poorly, to be seen as, a number, warehoused, marginalized. And I don't think I ever had that perspective before until I went through what I went through. So I think it's given me a ton of gratitude. My wife gives me a hard time because every night I lay down in bed. I love my bed. I found the best mattress in the world, and I love it. And I cuddle up in it, and I just dig around in it. She just hears me on the other side there go, I am so grateful for this bed. I love this bed. And she's like, I get it. You love your bed, but she can't fully understand it. I slept on a concrete slab for 3 years.
Wow.
Right. So there's perspective there, and there's gratitude there. I hear people complain all the time. We're on the golf course and somebody complains about the golf round taking too long. And I always say, well, it could be worse. And they kind of chuckle. And I'm like, yeah, you could be in prison. Mm-hmm. And they just kind of stop for a second, and they don't know if I'm being serious or not. And I think it's true. It's all how you look at any situation. So when you interact with people, whether they treat you well or not, you have a choice in how you deal with that. And I try to choose the right. I don't make the right decisions all the time. I still screw up all the time. I'm an incredibly flawed human being still, just trying to be better every day.
Well, I think you're doing a good job. A few minutes left. When you were keynote speaking, we connected through someone who saw you keynote speaking. What are your topics that you discuss typically?
It's my story. If you've listened to my podcast like you have, it's an unvarnished, transparent, accountable accounting of my life. But I want people to understand that, this is about choice. You're not a product of your environment. Life isn't fair. Like I said, it's about how you deal with it, and how you deal with it is your choice. There's a fork in the road all the time. Either you deal with something in a healthy, positive way, or a negative and toxic one. And then when you do deal with something in a negative, toxic way, and you screw up and you got egg on your face and it's embarrassing and humiliating, you just don't pack it in. Like, everybody's like that. It's not the end of the world. And I think this day and age, especially with, grade school kids and middle school and high school kids, and even in college, when they mess up and make a mistake and it's embarrassing and people know about it, they almost just go off the deep end because of it. Like, it's like the end of the world. And so I want to show them, like, no, it's not. It's today, and today can be bad and tomorrow can be amazing. It's what you make of it, and it's your choice. And if you choose a positive and healthy way, I'm a perfect example of what a solution-based life can look like. If you are open-minded to that, if you're self-aware, and can take criticism when it happens. Like, life seems to be going pretty well for me, but I've surrounded myself with accountability partners, and sometimes I'm old Ryan, and old behavior rears its ugly head because it just doesn't go away after you've been something for 35 years of your life. And when they show it to you, you get angry and you're upset because you don't want to see that ugly version of you. You don't want to see those character defects. But I've asked for it. I've asked for somebody to show me that so I can try to be better. And it's hard. And that's, life isn't easy now. I'm grateful for it, but it is what it is. Like, for everybody, we're all the same. We all deal with the same type of things, regardless of how Instagram pretty our life looks like in the eyes of everybody else.
Bust, as I said, is a 10-episode podcast series. You got together with Kevin Conley. I know your wife helped as well. How did that project come together? And again, so self-reflective. Not many people would be willing to do that. How did you kind of finally make this decision? All right, now is the time to do this podcast series.
Well, my wife and I came up with this idea that we were going to pitch a TV show to like ESPN or HBO or Showtime and stuff, where I go to every genre of sport, where there were individuals, men or women, who had tons of expectations on them, like mine, and didn't maybe live up to them. And people may refer to them as a bust or something like that. And the pitch was, we're going to call the show Bust. And I was going to be the host, because there's not many other people that can sit in a room, let's say Jamarcus Russell, and ask him some questions. And if he gives me BS answers, me calling him on it, right? There's, no one else can do that type of thing. So we almost had it sold to Showtime. We thought we had it, and there was some big corporate merger. I don't know how it works, but we didn't end up making it. So me and Kevin were out on the golf course one day, and I was just like, he was talking to me about what he was doing around the podcast world. And I said, well, let's repackage this. Maybe how about I be the first guinea pig? How about I just, and I think we first went in and thought maybe people maybe ask me questions. And then what we found, what nobody else did, was just you in front of a microphone, unvarnished, telling your story, and then have somebody who works in the entertainment side of things, and that's Kevin's world, to produce it, right? With sounds, things like that. The editing was amazing. We worked really hard on it for a long period of time. We probably had enough content to do 50 episodes, and we whittled them down to 10, and in the most impactful way we thought we could. And it's been astonishing and overwhelming to hear the response from people and how it's affected them. And I had my arresting officer send me a Facebook message this week that he had just got to episode 7 and he was hesitant to listen to it because he thought I would sugarcoat my arrests in Montana that he was a part of. And he was blown away by my transparency and my brutal honesty. And that's what he said in the message. And I just thought, it doesn't cost me anything to tell the truth. I think if people know who I am at all, they already think the worst of everything, right? My telling of it is not going to make it any worse. In fact, it may be worse in their eyes to hear it from me, what really happened. So it doesn't cost me anything to be honest about this. I'm not ashamed of it. It's made me who I am. It's almost a badge of honor. Of course, I would have liked not to harm my community and things like that. while I was going through it, and I've had to make amends and continue to make a living amends for that. But I'm incredibly grateful for all of that happened to me.
I commend you tremendously. Two more questions. The Straight Line with Ryan Leaf. Looks like you're having a lot of fun doing that show. You're in a new studio. You're working with PointsBet USA and NBC. What's that been like?
Well, it's been amazing. Like, you've talked about when you introduced me. I mean, I've been a mercenary of sorts for the last 6 years. Like, everybody's wanted to work with me, but just no one was like, he's our guy.
Right.
Let's build something together.
Yep.
And, PointsBet came in, and that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to back me. And I'm a huge loyalty guy. Like, you have my back, I have your back through anything. And we're going to build something together. I give a ton of, thanks to the likes of Rich Eisen, who, when he is out, allows me to sit in his chair and be the host. And I think it's a big reason why I got this gig and why I got this job, because not too many former players can sit in a chair solo for 3 hours and host his own show. And so I was kind of a unicorn in that. And my agent was able to, work with PointsBet and see what would be best. And we came up with this show concept, and it's based around football mostly, but all sports. I opened the show today talking about gratitude and about the great weekend I had and the award that my wife gave to me, and my son was there to see it. And so it's life, but it's sports. And that's exactly what my life is. My life is real life and it is sports fueled. And so that's what my show is. And there's a gambling aspect to it, which is the future of sports anyway. And I think getting in on the ground floor there is a perfect way to help shape it and make it something special. So it's 3 days a week right now. We're going to jump into 4 days a week starting the beginning of October. New studio in Manhattan. We've moved to Connecticut. Like life's getting big. Life's changing. My son's getting bigger. It's a good life. It's a good life.
I'm happy for you. Last question. You became a dad at age 40. How has fatherhood changed your perspective on things? I'm a dad. I know when I became a dad, it certainly changed my perspective. I see a lot of things through my daughter's eyes. Your son is pretty young still. How's your perspective changed since becoming a dad?
Well, I think, you probably know this, when they lay them in your arms, when they're born, for me, there was this moment of like this wave of unselfishness rolled over me. Like, I knew from that moment on, everything was going to be about him and her. And that's what it's been. Like, everything I've done has been about them. It kind of keeps in tradition with what I needed to make my life when I got out of prison, was to make it about other people. But when you see the version of yourself, like, he's me. I mean, he looks just like me. He's gonna be like 6'9". I mean, and it's the best thing I've ever done. Best thing I've ever done. I screw up all the time. As a new parent, like all new parents do.
Yeah.
And I think it makes it fun, and it also is a great teaching tool for me, because I don't, as good as my parents were, the stoicism of them when they mess up, they never let us really see it. Excuse me. I think it's important. My son knows, like, he's seen me mess up in front of him and stuff. And I remember one time he told me, because I told them this to him many, many times, when I messed up one time, he said, "It's okay, Dad. We all make mistakes." That's the teaching tool. It sounds like something really simple, something really, really simple. But when the guy that you look up to the most makes a mistake and can admit it and be okay with it and move on, he's in that place too, where he's able to know that he can mess up. He can go through life and screw up and acknowledge it and move on in a positive way.
Great lesson. like I said, longtime admirer of your story and how you've turned your life around. Ryan Leaf, listen to Bust, the podcast. You can find it on podcast platforms everywhere. The Straight Line with Ryan Leaf, really great show. And follow him on Instagram and Twitter at Ryan D. Leaf. Ryan, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining me on Sports Business Radio.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're listening to Sports Business Radio. We'll be right back.